and welcome to those who joined us now after this great food that we had from Eyal. By the way, I did not say it before, but all the food was vegan, to go to the topic we mentioned before. And also, I did not say before, when I mentioned Ruth Sirkis, that she was the one who first published Claudia Roden's book in Hebrew. So we also have some good, important connections here. So welcome back, as I said, and welcome to those who joined us. Welcome to those who joined us now. Welcome to Tel Aviv University Faculty of Law. For those who did not attend the first part, my name is Eyal Gross, and together with my colleague Yofi Tirosh, where is Yofi? Together with my colleague Yofi Tirosh, I am the co-editor of the book Studies in Food Law, which we are launching today. A special welcome to the students in the Mana Center summer program in food security, which are joining us for this part of the symposium. And they are from all over the world. And our partnership with the Mana Center allowed for this to be the third conference, as already mentioned, on the food and law we have been holding here now for the third year in a row, with a partnership between the Safra Center for Ethics, based here at Tel Aviv University Law School, and the Mana Center, based in the Plant Sciences. Thanks to this, we are managing to make this building a hub for food studies, and we hope to continue and develop this. It gives us great happiness to be able to do so. In a few minutes, I will introduce today's keynote speaker, Claudia Roden, but before that, I want to invite our Vice Rector, Professor Eyal Zisser, from some words of welcome on behalf of Tel Aviv University. Professor Zisser was, before assuming his current position, Dean of the Humanities at Tel Aviv University. He is the holder of the Yona and Dina Ettinger Chair in Contemporary History of the Middle East, and was also previously the director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies, and the head of the Department of Middle Eastern and African History. Professor Zisser writes extensively on the history and the modern politics of Syria and Lebanon and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And if I may add a personal word, in all his capacities, both as Dean of Humanities and Vice Rector, I found him personally as one of the persons always willing to help in any academic dream you want to fulfill, so I'm grateful for that. Professor Vice Rector Zisser.
Thank you, Eyal. Dear Eyal, dear Claudia, a few short comments, remarks, greetings before the main course. So we gather here to celebrate wonderful achievement, the publication of this book. This is a law school, so I have to confess to admit I haven't completed reading the entire book, but I read some of the chapters, very interesting. We gather here to acknowledge, a new field of study. I would call it food studies. This is law, food, but food studies in general. But of course, to welcome our guest of honor, Claudia. Thank you for coming to Tel Aviv University to address us in this very unique evening. So it's all about law, it's all about food, but it's more than that. Let me go back to Boston, 2005. Close, good, dear friend of mine is a professor at Georgetown University. I first met him in Boston in a conference. I saw the name of the lecture, The Land of the Orange. And I thought that might be very interesting to hear. I had no clue about what he had to say, but of course, he is of a Palestinian origin, and the lecture turned to be a sharp attack against our efforts here in Israel to steal the orange from, because the first who brought orange to this land were Palestinian farmers. We have to admit it. Also, it became, the symbol of Israel when it was born in the 50s, 60s, not anymore. I guess high-tech replaced it, but so I found it very intriguing, but of course I had my doubts, my thoughts about it, and I engaged. I wouldn't call it, it was a discussion that turned to be even a friendly discussion that ended in eating tahina and falafel in a Lebanese restaurant, but the owner came from Syria, from Damascus. But for clear reasons, he chose to call it Lebanese, and that's an interesting observation about why people in America will call the restaurant Lebanese restaurant, although they come from Syria and serve Syrian cuisine, which is, as I understand, better in your opinion. I do agree, I do agree. The other day, I looked at Google for an Italian restaurant, so I put Italian Boston, and I discovered an interesting book about politics in Boston, in which the argument of the author was that in order to understand the politics of Boston and how the mayor was elected, you need to go back to Sicily, because you know the dynamic among Italian voters has to do with you know, the practices and the mafia, not as a criminal institution, but as a social institution. And I could identify with it because I tend to tell my students, if you want to understand Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad, you need to read the book, but they don't read any more books, you know. So watch the movie, but it's an old one, you know. Students of today never heard about The Godfather, okay? So, but The Godfather, you know, so once again, Fernand Braudel, the idea of Mediterranean, the food, the society, the civilization, and indeed it's about law, but it's about culture, it's about civilization. And here in our region, the challenges are quite clear. There was an argument that, you know, you need to look for stability because people in the region, they don't dream about justice, they don't dream about the right to speak, they dream about the right to eat. But well, we saw that there is a clear correlation between, you know, living in a just society and enjoying those rights and having the basic right of to eat and to live in dignity. So this is indeed a very promising field of study, food studies, and I see here some friends from the Faculty of Life that engage in the idea of food security. So indeed this is something that we should promote in our university, but that's for maybe dessert. Now I think it's time for the main course. So once again, thank you, and I wish you a wonderful and successful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Rector Zisser. And now to our keynote guest. In 2013, I visited the exhibition Amy Winehouse, A Family Portrait, in the Jewish Museum in Camden, an exhibition that later actually was on display here in the Diaspora Museum in Tel Aviv University. The exhibition focused on the family life and Jewish life of Amy Winehouse, the wonderful and talented singer who died all too young in 2011. For me, the most moving item in the exhibition, which is now actually back on display in London, back in the Jewish Museum, apparently back due to popular demand, was a copy of Claudia Roden's book of Jewish food with an inscription from Amy's brother. The inscription read, "Dear Amy, in case of loss of faith, turn to page 75. With love, Alex." Page 75, if you could not guess it yourself, had in it the recipe for chicken soup, also known as the Jewish penicillin. This was the one item that brought tears to my eyes in an exhibition which is deeply saddening as it is, given Amy Winehouse's death at such a young age. This item, Claudia's book with that inscription, captured the way food has much more meaning than something we just eat, than something we consume in order to survive. Claudia's book with the dedication pointed to food as family, food as culture, as faith, as history, as identity, as love, and in this case also as eventual loss, death, absence that cannot be fulfilled, and memory. Of course, it was the iconic nature of Claudia's book that reinforced the multiple meaning of the item on display. For me, there was the additional issue that I do not eat chicken soup anymore, so the ethical question also loomed about what we eat. Indeed, the inscription and what it symbolized captures so much of what Claudia Roden's life work and tonight's talk is about, her understanding of the meaning of food. Every cuisine tells a story. Thus begins the introduction to Claudia Roden's magnum opus, The Book of Jewish Food, published in 1997, which was on display in the Amy Winehouse exhibition. That introduction tells a story. Maybe if she's here, we don't really need a picture, right? It's like the parents who, you say your kids are so cute, so wait until you see the picture. So that introduction tells the story of Claudia's own cuisine and her own personal story, the introduction to the Book of Jewish Food. Every cuisine tells a story. Jewish food tells the story of an uprooted, migrating people and their vanishing words, she writes. It lives in people's minds and has been kept alive because of what it evokes and represents. If you did not read it so far, you really should read this introduction. And the story it includes of immigrating from Cairo, where Claudia was born, to a Jewish Sephardic family with origins in Aleppo and Istanbul, and then of immigrating from Cairo to London via Paris, and the story of her parents joining her in London after the 1956 war as refugees, and continuing to their death to live their Egyptian life in London through the food they eat. My own world disappeared 40 years ago, wrote Claudia in that introduction, but it has remained powerful in my imagination. When I first got this book, when it was translated into Hebrew, I was fascinated by reading it, by the many stories it included on the history of food, of Jewish food, and Claudia's own stories. But then I read a newspaper story on the book by Sherry Ansky, a wonderful Israeli food writer, who wrote that she told Claudia she was reading the book constantly. And then Ansky said, Claudia got very angry and said, stop reading it, please, and start cooking. It's a cookbook. Well, I chose to do both, continue reading it and cooking from it. In 1968, many years before the Book of Jewish Food, Claudia Roden published her first book, a book of Middle Eastern food, which revolutionized attitudes to the cuisines of the Middle East and North Africa. This book has been printed a few more times in revised version and is still a classic. Later books engage with the food of Italy and Spain and other topics. Also, Claudia is the author of, I tried to count but got lost because our new edition, 15 books maybe, altogether, yeah, about 15?
No, maybe 10. I'm not
No,
sure.
at least 11. She's not sure herself, yes. Second person, Jancis Robinson, the famous wine writer, said she cannot remember how many books she wrote. That's when you don't remember how many books you wrote, it means you wrote a lot. So this, in addition to a TV series on Mediterranean cookery Claudia did for the BBC, her work for the press, and many other engagements. I will not cite all of Claudia's resume and list of publication here, and it will take too long, and you can find it online. Or even better, for those of you who read Hebrew, read the interview Yofi and myself conducted with her, which opens the book we are celebrating today. I will mention that when Yofi and myself started working on the book, right away we knew we wanted to interview Claudia for it. This is because Claudia Roden's life work, as we write in the introduction, and thank you for Yofi for articulating it so well also in the introduction. This is because Claudia Roden's life work, a pioneering, influential, and expansive documentation of food culture in the Mediterranean and among Jewish communities, represents for us the multidimensional nature and the complexities of thinking through food. In her research, the outcome are canonical cookbooks. Roden refuses, or does not even consider it possible, to deal with food techniques and recipes without placing them within the context of where and when they developed, were prepared, and were served. As a woman, Roden had to cope both with the objection to the mere idea that she will work for a living. She told us at first she had to hide the fact she was working for a living, and with disparaging attitudes to writing about food. But her biography provided her with constant dialogue with a variety of languages, histories, political powers, and food cultures in a way that made her identify the importance in researching and documenting food as an axis of identity, family, migration, community, and longing. We want to thank Ronit Vered, hi Ronit, Israel's #1 food writer, in my opinion, for making the connection between us and Claudia, and thank Claudia for her generosity, friendship, and for traveling here especially for this occasion. Claudia Roden is a president of the Oxford Symposium on Food and Cookery. She is honorary fellow at the Center for Food Studies at SOAS University of London, a center of which I am a member, which makes us formally colleagues. And she's also an honorary fellow at University College London and was a visiting fellow at Yale University. I will not read all the awards and honors she and her books were bestowed, as the list is very long, except mentioning that she was awarded an award for life achievement by both the Guild of Food Writers in the UK and later a similar award by the Jerusalem Cinematheque. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the one and only Claudia Roden.